You are off the coast of Utopia. Today I am in conversation with Portuguese artist Antonio Macedo. Based in Porto, Antonio takes as his subjects the female form, landscape, and still life. I first came across the works of Antonio 15 years ago after discovering one of his books in a used bookstore in Porto. Later, I followed up that with a visit to his gallery in the city. A couple of years ago, Antonio and I became friends through the magic of Facebook, and recently I've had a chance to visit him in his studio in Vila Nova de Gaia, just south of Porto. The interview begins with Antonio talking about his beginning as a young artist and how he discovered his passion when he came across a series of small framed drawings in his teacher's living room.
By the beauty of those things, and I was so amazed of started this sort of developed this. This is what started my passion for art, for for the pursuit of that. Feeling of the sublime, something that is just beyond ordinary, for existence. Things just seem to be so perfect, so atemporal, and something that almost like I could one could maybe capture a handful of eternity in that little drawing. Those drawings were fine. That's how I started. But I was quite a late developer because I was like sort of 13 or 14 by then. But once I set my mind going to art school, it sort of followed from there.
And went to art school in Porto?
Yeah, I went there for a couple of years, not even that, because for one thing, I found art school extremely frustrating. The teachers were not at all interested in figurative art, and figurative art is and always has been my approach to art, and so I found it extremely frustrating. And then we had a revolution in Portugal, and if they could hardly teach one before revolution, after revolution, it was bonkers. People just want that, or wouldn't paint, you wouldn't do anything. They just go through all the years, second year, third year, just by administrative means. You wouldn't have to do any work at all. And some of the people actually today are in art schools and colleges and everything are people that from that batch, people that never learned how to paint. Maybe they picked something up on the way, but So I went.
This is about 1974, 75?
1975.
Yeah.
And then I went, 74 was the revolution, 75 I went to the UK, I was 19 then, and always tried to pursue my dream, as it were. That was very difficult, because although England have great collections and access to material that one can use to learn and contact other artists and everything, you're 19, you're in a big city, and you don't know many people, and you don't know, which would be the right way to develop your art. It's not so easy. So it took me many years of trial and error to find out the techniques that I needed to do my art, and also all the wrong ways that I got into, and all the right ways, as it were, that will allow me to develop the command of the medium, as it were.
So you didn't really have any particular teachers or
No.
you're more self-taught, other than the masters?
Yeah, the masters. I used to go very often to the National Gallery, and I just copied it. And if you see my work from that age, from that time, you can see Vermeer in my work, or Van Eyck, or Rembrandt. You can see it, phases I went through. And obviously, I never was Vermeer, I never was Van Eyck. Yeah. Mm. But the love that I had for those paintings brought something to me, as it were. It allowed me to develop some bit of my own way of expressing myself in painting. And so, I have many loves in art, and curiously, and so when I reflect about it, I find it interesting that my love for paintings started with a love for the primitives, for the Van Eyck, or Van der Rijt, and all those. And then I developed a great love for the High Renaissance, Michelangelo, Botticelli, and all that. And then, it progressed. And it wasn't a deliberate thing. It's just that I found beauty and in the next development that almost recapitulated the history of painting, European painting, over the centuries. Up to recent people like Antonio Lopez and Naranjo and people like that. And then there's a point where when things, they're great paintings, but what kind of art really sort of is me? Because there's no point in me trying to be a sergeant. Not only I don't have that kind of sensitivity, but even my muscles don't work like that. So there's no point. It's like climbing up from a tree. So there's a point in which one has to take a look at oneself and see what are we? What kind of what actually flows from my hands. It's not just what I want. What actually flows from my hands? Because I can want many things. I would love to be a Velázquez. I'm not. I'll never be a Velázquez. I don't have. I wasn't born at that time. I don't have his muscles. I don't have his paints. I don't have his, whatever. So all we can be is ourselves. And as someone said, and I think there's something true in this, to be anything as an artist, you have to risk being a bad artist. Because if you're always trying to be very, very good, you're always copying something that was very, very good. You have to be true to yourself and try to be good at yourself, at what you do. Always, have nature and what happens in nature in mind and as a guide. But there's a point where you have to take your own risks. You have to risk that some of your paintings are going to be rubbish, and that's okay. If one takes that risk, then maybe some of the paintings are okay, and the ones that are rubbish, just chuck them in the bin, which I do. I go through a lot of paintings, and people. Are quite horrified sometimes because you spent 2 months on that painting. Are you going to wreck it? How can you do this? As well, I mean, just by looking at a painting that really didn't work out, to me it's extremely frustrating. So I prefer to just get it out of the way and start something new. And by doing that, over the years, I've been doing this for 40 years. All those paintings that went wrong taught me something. They taught me all the alleyways where it wasn't me going down there that way. No, that wasn't the solution. And little by little, I started to feel, yeah, well, maybe my little niche or the way that I feel, where sort of my inspiration comes from, is something that I have to respect and have to do that. I don't, there's no point in trying to be a Rembrandt or Michelangelo or whatever. I just have to be me, and if it's any good, good. If it's no good, well, what? At least I haven't wasted my time, or I haven't spent my life going into the studio feeling frustrated. At least I'm doing something that I enjoy to a certain extent. Although painting, obviously, it's a frustrating business in any day. But one has to please oneself to some extent, pursue one's dreams, I think. That's all.
What would you say your main sources of inspiration are right now, anyways, other than artists and art? But
well, as I said, I've gone through many phases. All beautiful things, expressive things, have to just touch me in some way. So it's I never know quite where I'm going next. It's periodically I go through phases where I feel completely dry. Haven't got a clue of what I'm going to do next. Everything seems, all paintings just feel, they just seem like wasted time. But then a little glimmer, a little light, whatever, starts to draw me to something. At the moment, I'm going, not going back, but I'm going forward but renewing something that was what brought me to art in the first place. Not that it is a conscious thing. It's just that it's like gravity. You let it go and it goes one way. And this thing of the sublime, this thing of the transcendence, this thing of the exquisite, this thing of something not quite, well, over real. It's not unreal, it's not surreal, it's more like...
hyper real?
No. Hyper is very, very much nowadays connected to doing everything like photographic, right. And I'm not interested in that at all. I think it's just my art isn't. It's not about that at all. It's like I don't know, shapes and colours and figures and silhouettes and chiaroscuro and whatever. To me, have to produce something in you. You have to create a movement. In my heart, and so my paintings are never something that I think of as in terms of illustrating a story. They aren't. Quite often, when I look at the paintings after I finish them, then I interpret them in terms of a narrative. Mm-hmm. But no, it's just this image, something that sort of starts pushing itself into my consciousness, and then I try to get a model, get how the light's going to be, how the drape is going to be, and then if the painting turns out to be okay, then then when I look at it, I think, oh yeah, this is what I was looking for when I was 19. Not knowing what I wanted.
Yeah.
You know, so there is this. I wouldn't call it spiritual because it's not. I mean, some people would call it spiritual, but to me, that's a word that is very. I don't know. It's not a word that I associate with my paintings, but there's something that transcends our day-to-day existence, and within the composition, within the shapes, the distances, the rhythms of art, within the expressions, what is there, what isn't, things that don't even make sense, but they do at the same time. Within that, there's an aroma. There's something that speaks to my heart. I don't understand it. I can sort of analyze it afterwards, but it's once I analyze it, somehow it loses a little bit of its magic. But maybe it's what I'm looking for. Maybe that magic, and when I look back throughout art history, I realize that the paintings that I love most are those that have that. They've got something that is sublime. There's something that is, wow, it's just, so this is what I do, other than that, I also, I do portraits and stuff. That is my bread and butter work, as it were. But it's not as important to me in creative terms as the other stuff. But anyway, that's how I describe it. It's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're talking about something visual with words, so it's difficult.
Very difficult, yeah.
That's why you paint, it's because of wordsmiths.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about your process. You talked about hyperrealism, photographic realism. However, you use photos in your process, right?
I use photos, and I also do not use photos. It's like, for example, I'm doing a still life. I would have the thing in front of me, or I'll do it one way or the other. It depends, but it's very difficult if you have an idea for this figure that is walking, and nowadays how do you get a nice looking model to model for you in this day and age for weeks on end or months on end, and pay them a decent salary for them to do it. I find it difficult, and I think many artists do what they do because they have limited means. So I think I use whatever comes handy to produce the work.
Yeah, I mean it's the work. I agree. The work that speaks in the end.
Yeah,
how
because
you get there
for
many ways.
People don't know. Many people know about Vermeer using a camera oscura or a camera lucida. The argument hasn't been settled yet. But do many people know that Caravaggio used concave mirrors? Artists have always been looking for ways of doing the image, in the best way possible. Sometimes you use one method, sometimes you use another method. Angel would do a small drawing and then have it squared up, and probably he wouldn't do the squaring up. He would probably get someone to do it, and then prepare the canvas, and it's whatever helps you to get to the image you want. It's okay. what I object to when people say, "Oh, it's in your paintings, photographs," and that, yeah. When I started pursuing images and seeing photos and everything, I was very, very naive about it. And if you take a photograph and then paint a picture from it, it's almost certain that's going to be rubbish.
Yeah.
Because, a photograph knows nothing. It's like, it's like you're putting sort of a car on self-drive and expecting the car to get to Lisbon. I mean, it won't. It's crashing the first tree, and photographs are like that. So if one doesn't know what one wants, then photographs are of no help at all. I mean, they'll help you do what a machine does, which is, okay, then in that case let the machine do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't see any point of it. This is, nowadays there's a fad for these hyper photographic paintings, which to me I don't understand it. I don't know, what's the point? You already got the poster. Why bother copying it in paint? It's the same bloody poster.
Yeah.
I don't see the point of it. But people are. I think people often are amazed at technical brilliance rather than art. I think art is something a little different.
Yeah.
I've seen. I mean, Giorgio Morandi, you can hardly accuse him of being a photographic painter.
Yeah.
I think he's a much greater artist than some hyper-realistic painters that we have around nowadays. Why? Because it's not just he paints the bottles and things and on the table, but it's those relationships, also that magic that happens between those shapes, that I don't know, that aroma, it's something that's intangible. When you get the bloody camera doing every little hair and every little, what are you trying to prove? Is it that they can do as good as or even better than the machine? Well, the machines can do it better. They can do that better. I mean, maybe they couldn't say 20 years ago, but nowadays they can spot, sort of the mites on your eyelashes. Is that art? Well, I suppose if one wants to call that art, yeah, we can call it art. But that to me is of no interest because it just amazes. It doesn't sort of grab your heart and take you somewhere.
It's cold. It's like
it's cold. Yeah. And you can see it straight away in work because you can see that the artist hasn't really looked at it. He just this is a good image. Then gets a camera, takes a photograph, and then copies that. It's not that.
Yeah.
That line, if you do it half an inch to the side, it's a different line. It does something different. And all those things together build up in a painting. This experience of poetry, visual poetry, and to me that's what I'm looking for all the time. So yes, I do use photograph, but I take hundreds and thousands of photographs. Quite often I look at it, I've got absolutely nothing there.
Yeah.
I get a model, get me in this position, then walk towards me, raise your hands, and then I do this, now I do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again, until I get the perfect silhouette. That gesture, whether where the elbow or the hand or the tilt of the head or something, that suddenly there's something undescribable and extremely beautiful that happens there. Magic. And I could put a robot taking photographs of that same model for 1,000 years and it will never happen. because it has no feeling. And by the time you got the face right, the hand would be wrong. You know what I mean? So then what I do then is first I have this idea in my head about what I'm looking for. Then I look for it. Then if it's a figure, I'll have, for instance, models, and I'll have them go through certain routines to see if I can get the image or the set of images that have that magic. And then I'll do 20 heads, or 50 heads, or 50 hands, or, and my models get rather frustrated because, they seem to be like, what you're doing, they've already done it 20 times. Okay, it's not right. Do it again. Just do it again until suddenly something there that's, there's something there that's different. And it's funny because there is this language of movement and of shape that when I look back into paintings of great masters in the past, it's there. They never went for those awkward, unreadable silhouettes. They always went for the good hand, the good foot, the good nose. Even with painters like Caravaggio, he loved that position of the hand. He chose that. It didn't happen. He chose that. Yeah. So when you put this together, then I build up quite sort of portfolio of work of stuff that I use to develop work. Then I have to choose what kind of size it's going to be, or even maybe I have that already in mind. Whether I'm going to do it in panel or whatever in canvas, and then how I'm going to, if it's going to be a cool painting or a hot painting, how I'm going to build the layers, how I'm going to attack the thing, because there's always the danger that it won't come off, and 1 in 3 of my paintings ends up as a failure because things somehow don't work out.
Do you do a small color study from the, or you just
sometimes, but quite often I have this thing in my mind all the time. I have this feeling of what a painting should be like. I can't describe it.
Yeah, I understand.
It's like it's in the cloud somewhere. And it's like I have a number of paintings that I don't even know about, but it's got in some my subconscious. They're there trying to find a channel to. It's a bit silly the way to describe it, but
that's actually how Odd Nurjum described it to me. Yeah. He just had these dreams or ideas in his head that would come out. He just had to get them down and sketched out and painted. So we're out there in ether.
Yeah, well, obviously not in ether. They're in your subconscious somewhere, but it's not something that you that happens by just laboring at it. It's. Because I've done that. Tried. I'm a rational guy. Okay. I'm going to do this still life. What are the parameters here? What is the chiaroscuro? Every single time I do this, it goes wrong. Because you just can't build something that is sublime out of things that are very ordinary, like your rationality. There's always something a bit. I don't know. You have to find it. You can't build it. Mm-hmm. This is why quite often I'm sort of don't quite know what I'm going to do, because the painting isn't happening in my head. It just isn't happening in my head. And I can put stuff together, I can get the model, I can get the fabric or whatever that I'm painting, and it doesn't happen. Just get stuff. I've started many paintings like that, and they always go wrong. I have to be in love with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I always work by trial and error. I quite often doubt my own instinct on these things, and I think, yeah, I'm going to do it. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I know what the parameters are. I'm going to do this because whatever, and it just goes dead. It just goes. I get bored. Somehow the thing doesn't happen. All the magic's gone, and I've wasted a few weeks pursuing something that doesn't work. So in the end, I come back to the strategy of following whatever is sort of flowing in my heart, as it were. I've had things like, I had this painting, it's all very well, why don't you do one similar to it? And, I'm a pretty obliging guy. I say, okay, I'll try something. It never works. It never works. The second one's always awful. Yeah. Always. You can't repeat it.
It's true. Yeah.
Does it happen to you? It's, I don't know. It's a mysterious thing. And art is, I think, good images. They're not there by the thousand. They're like sort of gold nuggets,
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
It's not something like you plant your cabbages and you get cabbages. You have to dig a lot, and sometimes you find gold. Quite often you don't. And then you're digging, and it's difficult when you try to dig where many other people have already dug. But you keep on digging and hoping, and sometimes you find something and you get quite enthusiastic about it. Other times you go through periods where nothing seems to happen. Anyway, it's not easy.
No. So from once you have your initial image and transferred onto the canvas or drawn on a canvas, then what's your process? Do you go in with the colors, or?
So usually, if I feel that I've got enough material to do work, then I start off with the drawing, because I think quite often the information contained in the silhouette is a good guide to whether that is going to work or not. Once I get that, I block in with straight oils. Try to get it as close as possible to the right color without being over preoccupied with finish.
Yeah.
And I generally go over the whole painting with this in this manner.
At this stage, do you use any mediums or dryers or thinners?
Well, at the moment I don't, because I'm an experimentalist, so I've changed my approach many hundred times. But each artist has to find a technique that works for him. My paint is always quite thin, so it's I find that the way it works best for me is to use just straight oils with linseed oil, and it dries quite fast, really. 1 day or 2 days it will be dry. Then I usually just try to go over it with a palette knife or something, just to get any little hairs that are stuck onto the surface.
Yeah. With a what?
Well, a little palette knife or
okay.
nothing that's too abrasive. Just something that will take any little imperfections that might have.
Scrape it down, basically.
Yeah, but without scratching it. Yeah. I was careful not to scratch it, but little hairs and little imperfections, and then and I know if the finish that I want will dictate what kind of approach I'll do on the top layer, on the top layers. If it's a dark area, if it's a hair or something like that, maybe I would use one kind of brushes, some kind of brushes. If if it's a light area, I might use other kinds of brushes, because you know that the rigidity of the brush, there's a connection between how hard a brush is and how soft the paint has to be for it to flow pleasantly over the canvas. If it's something very light, then I tend to use harder brushes, and if it's something darker, I'll probably use softer brushes. And sometimes in the painting process there are areas that I don't want to be too smooth, you know. And so if you're looking for a very smooth finish, then I'll start, as I said, do nibouche, you know, so underpainting, to get it as close as possible to the final effect. Although one doesn't actually get there, but try to get it as close as possible to that. And then on the second layer, try to do the same thing, but obviously with a thicker paint, and maybe even with some solvent to not to dilute the paint, but to make the mixing of the tints more efficient, because you know, this soft brushes don't mix the paint that much, and so harder brushes and more paint actually give you softer effects than soft brushes. Yeah. So something that I found. And then in some areas I would maybe glaze one or two bits that I found weren't quite needed a little bit more depth or something, but I try to avoid glaze as much as possible. I find it falsifies the whole feeling of the paint. But sometimes it's the only way to get a certain effect, and that's about it. It's not. I think painting is not. It's like playing football. It's not difficult, the concept, but it's producing the goals that is.
Yeah.
That's the rub. And looking a lot, you know, looking and doing, you know, just plotting at it for hours and hours day after day, you do get somewhere, I think. Although work by itself isn't any. Just by working, there's no guarantee that you're going to get somewhere interesting. But
no. Do you set yourself on a specific schedule for the day, or do you paint when you feel like it? Do you?
I try to be quite disciplined,
yeah.
Because oil paint, if you want to work wet in wet, doesn't like being left, you know, like that for days. And by the time you get back to it, then it's dry, so you have to start all over again. So the best way that I found is to start early and work at it, wet in wet, in that bit that you're doing and try to get it as finished as possible within that working session. One may be lucky for the paint to be wet enough on the next day to continue, but it's with my paint being quite thin, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
So I try to get it as finished as possible within that day, and I quite often will find that within a couple of hours, or 2 or 3 hours, I'll get most of the image there, and I'll spend the rest of the day just tinkering it and adjusting it and refining it, and quite often I'll let it dry, and then next day I look at it and say, well, this is good. I have to go over it again, and then I'll do a little bit of oiling out and retouching whatever is necessary. But so. But it's quite a simple technique. I mean, I don't use many fancy mediums and strange mixtures. It's fairly straightforward. The only thing that I would use is for glazes something like liquid or something, because I mean, in the old days they had these recipes for using some kind of resins and boiled oil and all that and whatever, because those were the materials they had. But nowadays there are these resins that have been specifically developed for that, and why not? Just use it. Yeah. But I don't use a lot, just as little as possible.
Yeah.
Then I'll allow painting to dry, and then I'll furnish it.
Now, didn't you say that you told me that you did some work as a conservator, and that you discovered that there wasn't really any resin in the layers of paint that you had worked on? It was mostly just oil.
No, it wasn't a discovery that I made. It was something like that I came across, because there is this mystery about what kind of technique did Van Eyck use. Did he start with tempera and finish in oil? So did he use some secret ingredient? And then they go, nowadays there are instruments that can analyze the oil content of paint, and then they found out it's just oil. But obviously the methods they used were very different from the methods we use today. The way they built up a paint will probably be different. Their glazes, obviously, because they derive their technique from people that used paint on glass. That's why this concept of glazes came from. There used to be, maybe not so much nowadays, but there used to be this myth that the old masters used all these fancy, incredible mediums, and there were painters like Joshua Reynolds that would admire the green shadows in Rubens' paintings, and then you try to emulate it and mix all kind of rubbish in this paint to make it look like that. And obviously this is why many of his paintings are completely wrecked.
Yes.
And then later on, when they cleaned the paintings, a lot of that green, beautiful shadows, in flesh, were actually bluish shadows that were covered with yellow varnish.
Yeah.
So he was barking up from a tree there.
And you got that from working on a dark ground and pulling a light color over it, so as it creates a scumble. It shifts towards a blue.
Yeah.
And the darks are just basically the ground coming through, and the blue comes from the thin white, the light color placed over top.
Yeah, what they call the turbid medium effect, isn't it?
Pardon?
It's what they call the turbid medium effect.
Okay. I don't know that for term, but...
Yeah, there was this restorer at National Gallery that sort of developed that term because he had to restore these paintings, and he came across this thing, as you said, that sometimes things look bluish because there's this veil of a lighter color over a darker color, and light, as it goes through those layers, it goes through both layers. The longer wavelength gets absorbed in the darker layer, and what gets reflected is the light that is shifted towards the blue from the top layer, which is lighter. A little bit in the same way that the reason why the sky is blue. The red just goes through, and what you see is reflected in the blue. So so a lot of it, and one thing, I came across many paintings from the 18th century. They were just obviously just done in oils, just straight, and you see paintings, self-portraits, and paintings that are half finished. You can look at the palettes. I mean, it's not like we don't know these things. There's thousands of self-portraits, thousands of paintings that are half finished. When you can see the process, you can see they didn't have any oil on the palette or any dippers or anything. Yeah. You can see what kind of brushes they use. It's the method, and those paintings are often in extremely good condition, much better than later Victorian paintings, for instance, where people were fascinated with this, golden glow of the old masters, which was just a consequence of darkened varnishes and stuff. All that is there are many myths associated with painting techniques in the past that are just that, they're just myths. Yeah.
Easy thing is just to paint simply, I think.
Yeah.
Follow a few basic principles.
Well, Bulgaro, people much malign painter, but someone.
Technically, though, he was
brilliant.
Brilliant, yeah.
Yeah. But then there was this guy, this American guy, that went and interviewed him in the 19th century. I said, well, Marcy, what is the secret, of art, great art? And you say, draw correctly, paint as you see, finito. That's great advice.
I like that.
Not a lot of rubbish. And obviously, you paint it on a grey canvas. It's not like the average canvas you buy in a supermarket. Obviously,
good materials,
good brushes, and good models, and stick to what you saw, and good sensitivity, the way you approach. The way a painting is built, quite often affects an awful lot the end result of what one gets. For instance, with Bouguereau, you would often do the figure first on the grey background, and when you're painting a figure on a light grey background, anything that you paint will look unfinished and too hot, because you're painting against something that is smooth and is very cool. So your natural tendency is to correct it so that it looks okay. But then when you paint the background, suddenly that flesh that you painted looks very cool and very light and very
Right.
delicate. That's a result of an approach, a method. You know what I mean? It's very different, for instance, from Tintoretto. It started a very dark background, and everything everything is very rather coarse, because he had to put a lot of paint to cover that brown background. Everything is very coarse, very, so the way and angles David, painting on a very reddish background. A lot of their flesh tones are very hot, very foxy because of that. It's not just that the paint gets a bit more transparent and you see a little bit more of it through, but by painting, you're painting against something that is red. Whatever you do to paint, it's never red enough.
Right, yeah, because you're working on a system, you're also relating to your
you're always relating all the time. So in the end, there are the method that you approach, and these methods have evolved over centuries. There's some schools that adopt certain method, and other schools that will adopt another method. But you see the effect of the method. David and Ang got their good things and bad things, and when you paint on a very strong background, like a very strong sort of brick background, all your perception of color relationships is always difficult, because you're always fighting this color. You're always fighting it. If you're painting on a cooler or sort of more neutral color, then you become very, very aware of small differences in hue. So I think a lot of the mystery in the techniques has to do with that, with the way that paintings were built, and also obviously the artist's sensitivity, I suppose.
So what about the future? Is there any particular goals you want to reach, or things you have in mind to do that you haven't had a chance to do, or more of the same perhaps, to chase the muse?
Well, as I said, I have, it would be nice to know what I'm going, so that I could prepare for it, but it just doesn't seem to happen like that. It's painting is just almost crystallized out of thin air, as it were. And all I have to do is to pursue that, and that's, I think that should be enough, I suppose.
One thing I was going to ask you, you said you moved to London?
Yeah.
In 1975. How long were you there for? Because now we're back in Porto.
I was there for 17 years. I mean, not in London. I was in London for a year and a bit. Then I moved to a town, an historical town, some 60 miles south of London, called Tunbridge Wells, and I lived there for the rest of the time that I lived in the UK. And I worked with galleries there. I worked with some galleries in London, both in my capacity as a conservator and also as a painter. But then, my personal life took quite a change, and divorce and everything. And I felt very lonely in Tunbridge Wells, although it's a lovely town. I felt very lonely there, and so I decided to make my come back to Portugal.
Mm-hmm. That would have been when, the mid-90s?
Oh, I've been back some 20 years.
It's not too far, anyways.
No, I go there. Oh, my daughters live there, so I go there regularly. and I always go to my old haunts, you know, the National Gallery, the Tate, and go and see the things that I like. But I'm not sure I'd go back and live that again. I don't know.
Well, it's quite a nice studio here, a nice place here in Porto, the great city. So
Yeah, it's a small town, but it's well, it's where I grew up. You know, my family's here. So. Apart from my
in this
brother.
town,
Yeah, well, my
Guy,
brother. Yeah,
Mm.
most of my family, you know, from here. So I see them regularly, and well, yeah, one has to live somewhere.
okay. Well, I think you've covered a lot. I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about. Or...
Well, thank you very much for
thank
asking
you.
me these questions. I do tend to ramble on quite a bit when I get into some
No,
themes.
That's great, though. That's what people like to hear. So.
And yeah, I just, yeah, what the only thing I'd maybe like to say is that it's this is it's a passion, you know. It's I get rather sad when people consider it like, you know, you like a trade or you're producing stuff. You know. Although, okay, you know, you are producing stuff. In the end, they're objects, as it were. But you know, it's like saying a poem is just words. You know,
Mhm.
just words. A poem is just words. You know. And it's not just words. It's the relationship between the words that make the difference. Otherwise,
brings
I
it to another,
I would be a Shakespeare, and I'm not.
Yeah.
You know. So it's like any newspaper clipping would be as good as I don't know, Camões or
Yeah.
whatever, and it isn't. Often I'm sorry, it isn't. And with the visual art is the same thing. It's not like you're painting a tree. Like anyone can paint a tree, or even a photo of a tree can be something. No, it's a tree that's got treeness. That makes you cry, that makes you dream, that you know, that makes you, you you feel emotional about it. It's not, you know, and this passion is. I find it very difficult to be able to convey to people that are starting to paint, because they want to know all the tricks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And how do you do this? And how do you got? I said, well, it's very difficult. You know, it's like I can teach how to do a tree, but I can't teach you how to do your tree. You know, something that is wonderful, like a tree like no one ever painted before, or like that drapery, or that shadow, or that whatever. It's something that's I don't know.
I was
I
telling
find
my
it very, very
students,
difficult.
only the first 30 years are hard.
Yeah, yeah. And well, and who was it Hokusai who was on his deathbed and was saying, I think I'm starting to get it now. Like that.
Yeah.
It's but it's you know, it's something that you do because you love it. It's well, it's good. It's great to sell, but even if you don't sell, it's a privilege to do something that is, you know, it's bubbling in your heart. And you can't think of yourself doing something else. It's like, you know.
You can't not paint. That's the thing.
Yeah, I can't not paint. You know,
Yeah.
it's. In fact, I go to people's houses. Why do they paint? You know, it's you know.
Yeah.
How come they're not painting?
Yeah.
It's a way of life. It's a way of looking at things.
Sometimes a curse.
Yeah, definitely a curse. Definitely a curse. Yeah. Yeah, but it's well, it's, you know, there's a time in life when one thinks, you know, I brought up my children, you know, I've got a house and this and that and the other, and you know, my days should be occupied with something that is not too dreadful, you know, something that is nice. Because our time here is very short, and if you don't do something that, you know, fills you with enthusiasm and you know, what the hell are you doing here? You know?
Yeah.
So I go to my studio to work. I've got something that I want to do, and it's a privilege to have that, because I see many people that, you know, they retire, they lost their aim in life. You know, life is bleak, you know, because you don't have your youth anymore. You don't have you know, whatever, you know. And it's a great privilege to come back to the studio every day and to be thrilled with, you know, the shape of a foot, or the way that, I say, a drapery just covers the figure, or the way that, you know, the light just goes past a tree or something. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a marvelous thing, and so it's I feel so privileged that I have that. Although it is very difficult, but at the same time it's a passion. What I can say.
Words of wisdom from a successful artist. That's it for now. Until next time, we'll see you off the coast of Utopia.